we were having some technical difficulties here down at Haps, and hopefully we'll figure this stuff out. I don't know if it's on me or if it's on the entire internet right now, but I'm Dan Beckman, and I'm here with Sam Dwyer. He is in Austin, Texas right now, where he can get an internet signal. And the topic of discussion this Thanksgiving Day 2020 is about the migration patterns this unusual year. And what's really interesting here, I think I just went dark. That might keep happening because it's crazy, is that Sam Dwyer grew up in Connecticut. He lived in New York, and I'm going to have him describe for everybody what he's doing in Texas right now, if this continues to work. The big F.
Yeah.
Sam, hello.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. So what are you doing there in Texas? I like your picture in the background and everything.
Oh, yeah, I'm currently at the Hyatt place here in Austin, Texas.
Oh, I've been there. I think I've done that one.
Yeah, the Hyatt place North. So
oh, I haven't done that. That's a new one.
Yeah. Well, Texas, I mean, Texas, I think one of the great mythologies of Texas is about, the going out into the West and striking it out onto your own. And I was very determined, after spending last winter indoors in New York City, I was very determined not to be stuck inside all winter again. So I took the PPP grants, some of the PPP grants that I got for my business, which is completely fucked up, and used it to buy some really inexpensive land way out in the middle of nowhere, where I've been slowly stacking a stone castle together.
Okay, that's interesting. I want to unpack it a little bit more. So, how did you find this area in Texas, and what drew you to that spot?
Well, my grandfather was a painter, an oil painter, on my dad's side in New Orleans. And when my dad was a kid, his grandfather took him on a road trip out there. And my dad took me on a road trip out there last year. So it's actually kind of like 3 generations of us going out there and being like, wow, this is pretty cool. And I guess I'm the first one to, go there and kind of stick it out there for a while.
We've been following along those of us who are on your Instagram feed, and it seems like an incredibly difficult place to do what you're doing. I definitely want to hear about your stone castle that you're trying to build. I think it's a really interesting project. But I also think that we want to hear about is the fish out of water story. And, there definitely seems to be some disagreement or different cultures going on between the coast and Texas. And you're somebody who grew up in a blue state in Connecticut, spent most of your adult life in New York City, but now you're finding yourself in rural Texas. What are some of the major differences culturally that you experienced there, and has it changed you?
As it what's me? Sorry.
Has it changed you? Have you become more like them?
Well, you know what I joked to some of my new friends at the bar that one of the nice things about being in Texas as compared to being in New York is it's a little less energy directed towards white men. I feel less self-conscious in some kind of ways, and they all thought that was pretty funny. The politics in New York City have become so extremely liberal. And so extremely racialized. I felt, I don't know, I felt like you're kind of forced as a white guy into this position where you're supposed to either apologize or, like there's some kind of obligation, which, I experience less of down in Texas. But, the culture is, you're so much closer to nature, and it's in the way that, city cultures change from any place when you go from an urban environment into nature is people are much more self-reliant. They're much less insulated, and this has a very strong impact, as one can imagine, on their politics. When you feel like you have this kind of like ultimate burden of self-reliance is yours and yours alone, it makes you less reliant upon these kind of larger social systems. And I think subsequently more suspicious of kind of, what they big government programs and all those kind of aspersions that they cast on liberal projects.
But you did have a government program that helped you to be able to start this adventure. And yes, we will be answering questions. And thank you, Emmy. We'll definitely be getting to that. But you did use a government program. It was something that was designed to, and a much lauded, potentially saved us from having a Great Depression program.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the PPP program was interesting, as a small business owner, because in some ways it it is income interesting as an income replacement program, right? Because it was for quite a large amount of income, and so it's fascinating to me how you kind of see this kind of like Republican aversion towards expanding unemployment benefits, but Mitch McConnell is for doing another round of PPP income. So it's, I think it's one of the ways in which kind of like these incentive programs have become racialized. But I would also say that, yeah, I mean, just a tremendous grant, and it enabled me to do something that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise.
Well, because you talked about the cultural differences that you experience from who you are and coming from New York to Texas, and the first one you mentioned is basically a gender related a difference. I guess I'll ask this question. We do have one on the table here, but do you think that you feel like you might want to stay? Do you like that better, considering who you are, even
Well,
though the conditions are actually physically, in some cases, emotionally tough that I've seen with the work that you're doing there compared to living in Bushwick?
I love the opportunity to be out on the frontier. I've lived in New York City for almost the past, I think, 14 years. So it's pretty exciting to be out there, and driving a large pickup truck, and having plenty of room to roam around and lots of physical activity to keep me up to. I mean, I think the thing with COVID last year that was really depressing was just being stuck inside all the time. And then also, increasingly in New York City, it feels like what spaces do you have to go and do things anyway besides bars and restaurants and, places where you end up just spending money. I mean, I feel like, one of the great things about living outside of cities is just you get to have a much deeper engagement with nature, especially when you're, creating kind of like a house out of nothing is really rewarding. And I think that that's why I did it.
Well, I want to make sure, I don't want to divert the entire conversation to this, but you did open this up, and Emmy is asking us, have you heard of white fragility? I
I
think
have.
that,
Yes, I have. I have.
do you think that you suffer from that, or do you want
I
to
think I
describe
think
your
that I
understanding?
think that the paradigm in which that construct is offered is not necessarily one I agree with, without
Okay.
offering my dissertation on it.
Okay. Well, I think what I'd like to understand a little bit more about what you said in a broader context is if you look at the election results, for instance, it seemed like we have a pretty divided country. And some of the issues that you're talking about definitely have to do with gender politics. I think that gender politics are often overlooked in how much they affect
Yeah.
everything. But if you just look at the politics through the gaze of gender politics, it might answer all the questions that we have about what's going on. But putting that aside, just for a moment, it does seem that the Democrats do not have a message that resonates in rural America, and it would also probably seem like the Republicans may not have the same message in some of the urban areas in this country. So you've gone between one of the most dramatic shifts. Your area is unpopulated. It's not that it's just small town Texas where you're at. You're actually by yourself there. Do you understand more about what these people are thinking and why they vote the way that they do?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, in Southwest Texas, in the Big Bend Valley, all along the Rio Grande, it's a heavily Latino area, and it's also a heavily Latino area that swung, I think, very strongly for Trump in this election, and it makes sense to me, because it's more about it's more about the values that they have. It's about the pride that they take in their hard work, and it's about their desire to protect their place in society. Um, which I think is one of the reasons why Trump was so popular amongst my neighbors. They have that, they have this kind of it's a frontier outlook, but it's also a frontier and south facing outlook. You know,
Well, I think the thing that people can't understand is if you live near the border and you're Mexican, this, are you concerned about being mistreated because of the person or the type of person that you are? I think people make a leap or an assumption that you have relatives still in the country or that you have a closer relationship to the immigration laws. And so you support, they use the just general term immigration, but what do you think these people are actually thinking who live in your area? What do they want?
what they really want. I mean, they want new pickup trucks. They want the American dream. They work hard. Um, I think probably one thing that could make a big difference in a lot of people's lives in rural areas is better access to is medical care and education. I think that that's probably one of the strongest issues that the Democrats have that they can wedge in there, because I feel like access is one of the most limited things that these communities experience.
Well, I mean, they also, there aren't a lot of people there.
Yeah.
Do you think that people in your area live there by choice, or is it something like you where you chose to go there and you
There's a
could live in a
there's
place?
there's a bit of both. Part of it is, and it's a huge area. For example, there's a big difference between Alpine, Texas, and Terlingua, Texas, which is down in the gateway to the Big Bend Park, and Lajitas, which has a very fancy resort that all these guys fly into on little private planes. And so yes, there's a strong vacation element in the Big Bend. There's a strong kind of like cottage community sort of thing. People tend to make pretty modest shacks because it's hard to make an off-grid vacation place that's very enormous. So there is a downward pressure on the size. But I would say that the visiting community, um, and the locals, that there are some class differences and educational differences. Obviously, if you're really from there, it's harder to make a living in these super, like Terlingua is such a small town. A lot of people go further north up into, you know, probably Alpine is the closest biggest town, and then further north, Midland, Odessa, or out to El Paso is, those are the kind of big population centers for West Texas.
Well, I have to be forthcoming here. I was born in Dallas, but I had not spent very much time there. I grew up in Ohio, but on my passport it says that I was born in Texas, and I have to confront that when I leave the country, not totally understanding the culture, although I have an idea about how things go there. What um, what do you make of things there in Alpine? What do people do for fun? Are they accepting of you there? Because
I've had a good time in Alpine. I have. I've made some friends, and when people find out I'm from New York, they rib me a little bit because they know that I'm more liberal than they are. But everybody's just happy to kind of, hang out and drink at the bar, and in their case, none of them are wearing masks because that's kind of the ethos that they've decided upon for themselves.
are you? Do
A-
you
a-
succumb to the peer pressure in that situation? You can't drink with a mask on either.
Well, I'll tell you this, I had COVID so badly, and they say you can get it again, but I'm not that worried, frankly. Although I
Okay.
should be because I was sick as shit for probably 8 weeks and still have
You
COVID.
are right now. You feel sick.
No, no, no. In March, I had it in March.
Yes, you had it early and you were part of the wave that hit New York City. And I don't know if you want to talk about that experience because I think the more that people kind of meet people and hear about it, they can frame an understanding of it. What
Yeah.
was your COVID experience like?
Well, I would say that I am the youngest person that I know personally who was really sick from it. But I always had pneumonia, I have asthma, and I always had breathing trouble when I was a kid. So when I got COVID, I thought it was kind of just like more of the same. I was, it's funny. My girlfriend was very worried because I was like I couldn't breathe, And so I wasn't able to breathe. And she was like, "You've got to go to the hospital." And I was like, "No, it's fine. It's normal." But that was pretty terrible. But the neurological effects were really awful as well. Um, and yeah, just being stuck inside for that whole spring was really catalyzed me to want to get outdoors. And I think that
So,
that's really a big part of what drove me out here to Texas.
did you get medical treatment? You went to the hospital. What happened?
I did. I had a oxygen treatment, and then I was on prednisone, um, which is a steroid. Which
Oh, so that they got to that early, I guess. They knew that that was something that could help you.
Yeah, that's often a treatment for pneumonia, asthma, because it reduces inflammation, and it also works in the case of COVID. And Trump actually was given a steroid as well, a different one, but
So,
I
do you
think
have any lingering effects from it? You just feel that you have the antibodies at this point, and
uh, yeah, I have odd like neurological sensations in my fingers, and two of my fingers they fall asleep when I'm sleeping. It's just one of those strange things.
okay.
Yeah.
And then I want to. We should do another episode where, and hopefully, the internet will work in some way where we can see some of the things that you're building. I don't know if you have a picture that you can show people of what you're working on there, so that
I
they
do.
have an understanding.
I do.
We'll upload it when you can, but um, I want to focus this discussion more on the New York and Texas experience that you've had. You're in Austin right now because your
Yeah.
girlfriend came to visit you. Has
Yeah.
that been interesting for you? Do you feel that you've changed, and that I'm not, you know, to get into your personal life, but just in general, meeting somebody from where you came from and your past culture, do you want to go back home right now, or you
You
want to
know what?
stay doing
I,
this?
I love New York. I think New York is the most interesting city in the country, and I say that as someone who's lived there for a long time. So I might be a partisan, but if I want to be outdoors and see nobody, I can get that here. And if I want to be in a city, New York is for me the only one that really does it for me.
Do you feel like you have given up on New York in its time of need, that you've left town when it needs to keep hanging on and doing it and showing that it's still open for business, or there's just nothing going on there and it's
Well,
not the time?
well, I will tell you, I'm looking forward to going back there. I'll be back there for 2 months, and I'm very excited. I have a project in mind. So I've developed these tents. I designed and I like invented these kind of tent structures that I've been using out here in Big Bend, and I'm excited to go back to Brooklyn, and I'm going to build one on the roof and open up like a secret bar that only seats like maybe 4 to 6 people at any time.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm going to try to make like a winterized tent. And that for me is exciting because the thing that's the biggest bummer about New York is that it's hard to find space. It's hard to find, free areas. It's hard to find places where you can just do stuff. And it's hard to be creative there. It's hard to be a creative entrepreneur there unless you have a ton of money already behind you. It's hard to do anything in New York if you don't have a ton of money behind you. So I'm really excited to kind of try to bring this kind of I don't know, like a pirate ethos to New York.
well, I
And
mean, Midtown is empty right now, I've heard. I mean, I think that there are, you know, ways that you can do it now. It might be the opportunity of a lifetime to
yeah,
get in there. Is that something that you agree with?
I mean, it might be. I don't know. I think that there's still probably a lot of business people as far as getting like official recognition for leases and things like that. I think there are a lot of landlords who are still living on some kind of fantasy world.
Yeah, well, they don't have to pay their mortgage right now if they don't want to, and there's all these, suspended things that who knows when they're going to be undone. Um, I guess getting a little bit more back to what is Texas culture like, because you've experienced a lot of it. You've experienced El Paso, you've experienced Midland. Um, how do you approach people? Do you have friends there? Do you think that
Yeah,
you're making friends?
I am making friends. I'm making friends. Um, Actually, the biggest friend I've been making is with the realtor who sold. She's this older woman in her 70s. This realtor who sold me my place. She and I get along quite well. actually. And we had this business because I found this guy was I found this real estate scammer who was active in our area, and uh, and I kind of like revealed him to the community, and so that's been an exciting adventure.
Okay. Well, I mean, do you go for days without seeing anybody else while you're building this house where there's no water, no electricity, and no sewer or internet?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There'll be weeks without anybody out there.
And you don't see anybody for weeks, and you're still motivated to do it?
I wake up every day and I start stacking rocks and mixing up concrete because there's nothing else to do.
Okay.
And
And you
around
do it.
Yeah, so it's well, I wake up probably at 8, start stacking rocks, and then eventually I'll about noon, 1 o'clock, I'll crack a beer, drink a bunch of beers, carry rocks. Uh, you know, it's a good time.
Okay.
It's a simple life.
And your goal is to make this into a house you can live in, or is this the beginning of a experimental prototype community of tomorrow?
I think it's just you know what I really like. I love the idea of like maybe it's not like a civilized environment, but it's like going to be like a lean-to that it's like a bunker, and the walls will be like 2 feet thick, and you can go there and just kind of stay there for a couple of days. I mean, you'll go crazy if anybody tries to stay there as long as I've been staying there. I would go crazy if I didn't have the house to build because there's nothing to do. But it's a really good place to go and read for a week, or to write for a week, or to think for a week.
How do you handle gray water in that kind of situation?
Oh, the plants love it.
With number two?
Number two, oh yeah. So number two, what they call it cat holing. You know how a cat buries its shit? That's what you do.
Yes.
Yeah, you bring a shovel.
Okay. And what are you eating
It's
there?
and it's the desert, so it dries out pretty quick. It's not like it's not like within like probably like a couple days, it'll be just like a dry turd.
Okay. And do you do it in the same spot, or are you spreading it around?
I've confined my activity to the same spot.
Do you,
It's a mound. It keeps getting bigger.
what are you eating there?
I brought a grill out there, so I have a propane grill. So, you know, hot dogs and I don't know what else. All the normal stuff. I mean, just camp food. A lot of sardines. I really like sardines. A lot of sardines and Triscuits. A real pioneer.
And are you generating money now? How do you make a living in order to be able to do this? It's still some of this PPP funding,
No, I'll
or
tell you, the vehicular stuff is a nightmare. It's one of the most difficult places in the country to drive around. Because the roads are just so rugged. It's an hour and a half on a really rugged road, and it just destroys vehicles. So I've pretty much spent everything I have, actually. I burned through all of it, which was kind of the point anyway. I mean, I wasn't planning to save it. I was just going to spend it on this project.
well, you were able to afford this Hyatt place that you're in now. How did you do that?
Oh, my girlfriend got it.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah.
Um, okay, well, so
I'm not quite out there with my change cup yet, Daniel.
okay, well,
But you'll be the first one I call.
yes, I mean, there's coins on Haps too. You should see if those help you with this. Do you have a long-term ambition for this, or is this just something that you're doing right now during this time?
Yeah, I think it's something that I would like to make that I'll be able to come back to in 20, 30, 40 years, And I think it'll be something that, I'll have for the rest of my life.
Okay, so you're building this, and do you expect anything else to come from it? I mean, one other question is just about Marfa, which is in the area, and it's a hipster destination at this point. People driving from LA to the East Coast or whatever are stopping there and falling in love with that place. Do you feel like your place could become an outpost that eventually becomes something like that, or an offshoot of something like that?
Well, it's a great place to be an artist because it's the reason why I'm there is because you can buy your piece of land for $6,500, $10,000, whatever, and you can do whatever you want out there. Marfa's become more expensive, and it's like I mean it's funny when you spend a lot of time out in that part of the world. The Marfistas, the people who drive in from LA, are pretty funny because you can recognize them almost immediately because they dress so differently. They're clearly there for something. I like to make fun of Marfa. I call it Hershey Park for Donald Judd. Um,
Okay. And
yeah.
what are you a Texan now?
No, I don't think I'll ever be. I'll never be a Texan.
Okay. What's the difference? I mean, you're not a Marfa person, I guess.
No. Well,
A
I'm not a
Marfite.
cultural consumer so much. I'm more of a producer.
Okay. That makes sense. So you're different than that. But are you a New Yorker?
I don't. I think you know what they call me out here. They call me a Yankee.
Okay, that
I think,
probably makes sense.
and I think that that's kind of the historical. That's the historical analysis, right? Of what you know, of what Anglo's from the north are.
You do sound different now. Maybe you're tired, but you do sound like your accent is sucking in some of the Texan because you're from New England.
I hope so. But I don't really know what my own accent sounds like, frankly.
Okay. Well, I guess, is there anything else that you can say? Because a lot of people feel like the country might be close to a civil war on some level.
When I first moved down here 3 months ago, the realtor who I bought my place from, she's like in her mid 70s, and we had a great time talking. But on politics, we don't see eye to eye. And she goes to me, "If there are any anti-fuzz that come down here, I'm ready to blow them away." And I was like, I just really don't think that the anti-fuzz are going to come to Alpine, and I just don't think it's a problem. You don't have to worry about it. People are pretty chill if you just hang out and get to know them. If you come at people with preconceptions, then you're bound to maybe you'll confirm them for yourself. But if you just hang out around people, and I've always found this, just hang out with people, and it's pretty fine. And the more you hang out with people who are different from yourself, the more you do to advance, change and understanding.
Um, it does seem that there's a lot of people from all over the country that are moving to areas this year for more space. Do you think that a lot of them will come back to the cities when this is over with? Is this a COVID thing, or will people stay in these places that they found because they discover that this is better for them?
Well, I think that COVID is the inciting incident, but it's not going to be the only thing that's going to drive change that I expect for our society over the next 5 to 10 years. Um, and I think that there is, part of yeah, part of moving outside of cities is that people's money goes a lot further. But what I anticipate is that, with jobs becoming more and more remote, I imagine that salaries will be pressed down for the professional class. And I'm anticipating that the salaries of the professional middle class are going to be heavily depressed in the next decade, and that unless there's some kind of political change that happens, even more and more people are going to find themselves in tough economic situations. And I think we're beginning to see both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are being pulled to the left because of this.
Okay, so your vision is that because you can compete and have lower cost of living in these other places, that there's people with talent that will be in these lower cost places, and that companies will just pay them, and that it'll be harder to compete from a more expensive place for the same job.
Yeah, yeah, I would say that that's true. And then also, there are a lot of people who live in cities that, are just living in cities because of work, and they're happier living in the country anyway.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. And for yourself, it sounds like you want to go back to New York, though,
I
and you
want to
want to
have
have this
everything.
balance.
I want both.
Okay.
I want to go to Texas. I want to go to New York. I want to go to Paris, London. No, I want to go. I go everywhere. Why choose just one? I
Do you
told you
think
my
that you will be more hard spoken and fast spoken when we talk to you from your tent on a New York rooftop than you are right now? Have you do you change with the place that you're in? Because you definitely seem more like a Texan now. You don't have the same edge that you came with. The irony seems to be, it's still there, but it doesn't seem to be as strong as it was.
well, I'm maturing, Daniel.
Oh, so you think you go back to New York and you're going to be a more earnest person when you go back there?
I
When
think so.
somebody makes
No,
a smart ass joke.
you and I have known each other for a long time, and I'm not 27 anymore. I'm 32.
Okay, that's a big gap. You know, I'm pushing 40 up here with the glass wall behind me. So
I see that.
yeah, I think that people do blend into the places that they are. I guess the thing that I spent a lot of time in Montana this summer, and in fact, that's where I based my reporting from. And so a lot of these questions, I'm not trying to lead you, but I understand where you're coming from. One thing that I just really liked about it is, and I think I agree with everything that you've said so far. But one thing that I found, at least in the town that I was in, is that I think people were nicer.
Yeah.
Here's another point, though. Here's another point. This is something I've talked to people about, and this is in terms of the mask, no mask problem, but it's actually a larger problem or point of contention. There's a lot more death and a lot more danger, it would seem, outside of cities.
Yes.
So if you think about it from
Much
a public,
closer to death.
yeah, all the time. And I don't know about the rates of death. Maybe they're the same, maybe they're better. But if you are working in a rural environment, there are, for instance, ranchers that have cows, you have to kill them. The intention of having those cows or killing them, there are also a lot of farm accidents that happen. It's more dangerous work than sitting at home. And you hear a refrain often. It's not. Some people do believe that this virus is real, but that it's when it's your time, it's your time. Have you heard that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Texas ethos, and there's something regrettable about it because, it's a mistaken perception to think that your actions only affect yourself. And so, the way that they view it, a lot of the people I've spoken to, is it's a personal choice. If you want to wear a mask, you can wear a mask, but don't tell us what to do, and don't come down here and tell us, how to run our lives, how to run our businesses. And there's a large part of that I agree with, but it resonates more when you're in a smaller community than when you're in a city of 7 million people. And I think that there's a difference in perception between rural and urban environments where you feel like different types of government make more sense in areas that are more rural versus more populated. When you're in a town of 2,000 people, it seems ridiculous, these orders. And then, but what the error of perception is that you don't realize that your actions may kill somebody else's grandparent. It's about the extent of causality and the extent of responsibility that you experience. Because I'm as I've kind of come to understand the Texas perspective, which I think is the one that you still see in El Paso. I was in El Paso 2 months ago. I spent a week in El Paso, and they were just going to bars like everything was normal. And I had just come from New York, and I thought it was the weirdest goddamn thing I'd ever seen. And I was like, this place is going to get it. And it is, But I think that they feel very strongly that, that if you don't want to get it, you take precautions. Don't tell me what to do. And there is a part of that makes sense to me. I do understand that.
What is it on this Thanksgiving holiday? What is it, your definition of America as somebody that comes from New England? And in some ways, I mean, are they telling you what to do in New England? Do you have freedom there? What's the difference between the freedom that people are talking about in Texas and the Pilgrims, whether or not this is part of their intention or not? The Puritans, how do you reconcile that
I'm
within
glad
you?
you brought it here because I was actually preparing notes on this earlier.
Oh, well.
And so for both, it's about the frontier, right? And it's about the frontier, and it's about how America delivers freedom. So for the Pilgrims, freedom was, at least mythologically, it's the freedom from religious persecution. And the cowboy narrative is a little different. The cowboy narrative and the Texas narrative is, freedom from kind of like urban dominion, which kind of gets into the Southern thing about freedom from, the South has this kind of like freedom from Northern dominion as part of their mythology. And I think like what you find, and I was thinking about, being here in Austin and being an oil country, it's freedom from economic dominion. That's what the frontier of the internet was. That's like what's super exciting about new industries, right? Where, people can go wildcatting and start a web, start of the Facebook. It's America has to have a promise of the frontier. It has to have this kind of, we have to have this promise of escape. And that is where our frontier is. And you could still find it out in Texas, because land is still cheap. And when land is, land is very important psychologically to people, I think. And being able to afford even inexpensive land that, nobody in their right mind would want is really exciting for someone from a city like me.
Yeah, that is what you have, and now you're in this sort of middle ground. I do have to mention this, that there were some VCs that left San Francisco, and they left what I call TripAdvisor reviews, where they complained about the cleanliness of the hotel room that is the unhoused of San Francisco, and they said they're taking their money and they're going to Texas and they're going to Austin. They're not going to where you're building a house. Those people are meeting you there. Do you have something to say to them? Do you want to welcome them or embrace them into your situation? Are they going for the same reasons that you are? It sounds like you didn't write a TripAdvisor about New York. You're just trying to add on.
Yeah. I'm just a part of the city. I'm there to make it. Hopefully I'm there to make it more fun. That's what that's what I try to do in New York.
I try to keep these things without editorials, but one thing that I noticed where I was living this summer and where I've been going for basically my entire adult life in Montana is that there are people who come from outside. Most of the people from that state came from somewhere at some point, somewhere else, obviously. But they come there and they appreciate and they love what's there. And then for some reason, when they decide to move there, they bring the culture that they're running away from. They bring the yoga places, they bring the coffee houses, and then they bring the town meetings. And instead of embracing what's there, do you think that they either they don't know a different way to live, or is there a certain crowd of people that's never going to be happy and they're going to keep ruining everybody else's thing?
I think it's related to consumerism. I think it's about consumerism, and it's about carrying with you a way of just engaging with the world that is all about what you can buy and access to things to buy, and this kind of like heavily mediated engagement with the world that is mediated by capital. And I think that one of the things that kind of I'm indifferent to. You get some junior interviewers back there. One of the things that I'm kind of makes me indifferent about Austin is it seems like what the people want is like this very boring like it would be boring for New York City. Like we wouldn't be excited about it. That's this kind of like new. It's like we got a new corporate salad chain kind of shit. Like you can use your app and we'll deliver the salad. Fuck that. But anyway, the missus and I have our Thanksgiving dinner that we're gonna go get ready for.
Okay, yeah, I agree. Misses, I didn't realize that at this point. Where are you doing your Thanksgiving then? Are you doing barbecue or whatever?
No, we're going. We have a reservation somewhere. I don't know exactly where.
Okay, well, I really appreciate you taking the time this Thanksgiving. It's kind of like the Dallas Cowboys playing on Haps. We have you, the Pilgrim from Connecticut, who is in Texas. We do hope that you'll come back, and you didn't show us any pictures of what you're trying to build. If you have any that you could throw up here, I think people would appreciate it. If you can't, we'll do it some other time.
Yeah, there's no obvious way on my phone to do that.
Okay, yeah, it's a little bit more of a desktop thing. I'm still learning how this system works, but Thanks again, Sam. You are actually in Austin, Texas. I put Alpine, but do you have anything you want to say as we close this out this year?
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to you. Thanks, everybody out there in Haps World. And this is Dan Beckman reporting for Haps.
Bye-bye.
Okay. So that's like a complete video now. Oh, shutting down.